Well, we're definitely back in a tropical air mass, getting those thick, low clouds and much higher dew point, coming up into the 60s. I guess that's for the first time this year. And man, what a contrast from a year ago. I wanted to show you this graphic. That shows the lowest temperatures recorded during that mid-February cold wave. And this is from a lot of the observing sites, the ASOS stations, basically from the climatological F6 data. And we can see that sub-zero temperatures came all the way down towards Crockett, Texas, towards Waco, Stephenville, and back up through Abilene and Lubbock. Now, the asterisk stations, those indicate that the record or the low temperature was set the previous day on the 15th. Minus 17 at Wichita, and this minus 20 right there, that's Fayetteville, Arkansas. That was an all-time record. A lot of these temperatures, they did not quite break the record set in 1899, but Fayetteville did. And Hastings, Nebraska also broke a record. So if you're down there in Texas, Oklahoma, feel free to pick out your station and see what you got there. And as far as that opening clip, let's take a look at a sounding and see what it looks like. Yep, this time of year we got to start using the dew point map. And you can see that moisture axis right up there through the Interstate 45 corridor. So sounding out in this area is going to look like this. It's certainly a loaded gun. That's the cap, the elevated mixed layer, up at about 10,000 feet. Down below it, a very deep tropical layer. Now, this is a very rich tropical air. You can see the dew points for the most part are in the 50s and 40s. However, for early March, this is definitely juicy air. So a lot of the stratocumulus being produced in that layer right there, underneath the cap where we get that lifted condensation level forming. There's really nothing to resist that rising air as it rises along the moist adiabat. So it just continues rising and eventually bumps up against that lid, that cap right there, and spreads out laterally. So what you see there, let me see if I can pull that up. I'll just have to show it to you in my editor here. Yeah, through the breaks in there, you can see the flattening of those stratocumulus layers. And the actual bases where it starts out is going to be these dark splotches. That's the rising up drafts. And as they grow vertical, they begin spreading out there beneath the cap. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Yeah, see off there in the distance, there's the vertical elements, and then you can also see some of the horizontal elements through those breaks. Anyway, some neat stuff there. I like it when we can visualize what is on the soundings. So let's check out the surface chart for today. We are really shifting gears here into spring. You can see the temperatures up there in Montana, North Dakota, coming up to the 40s. And down south coming up close to the 80s. Now, what we have going on here is a stagnant frontal system out there near the Continental Divide. Back behind it, you can see the air mass is mild. The tip-off is going to be Las Vegas with 53 degrees. Why is 53 degrees important? Let's go over to Wikipedia. Yeah, how many of you all use Wikipedia for forecasting? Let's see here. Yep, we just bring up the climate tab, and there's the chart. It is early March, so we should be seeing temperatures of 49 in the morning and 70 during the afternoon. So, yeah, we should be seeing 70 degrees. Well, that's not the case. It is a cool day there. So that's going to strongly indicate a cold air mass. The Los Angeles area, 56 there. That's going to be kind of cold. I don't know about Phoenix, 69 there. Yeah, my gut feeling tells me they should be up near 80 this time of year. Maybe like 77. Where's the climatology? Yep, 77 degrees. So we're quite a few degrees short of that. So once again, that's going to be cold air. So this is all your Pacific air mass, which does have a southwesterly flow, but it's kind of spiraled around, kind of up into this area of low pressure. And further out to the east, this is going to be the hot desert air, the continental tropical air mass surging eastward, being drawn up into this baroclinic system. And there is some very warm air back behind that, 84 there at Childress, and it does cool off a little bit to the west. And I don't know, maybe we could put the cold front further out to the east. I'm going to consider that. Then further out ahead of it, we've got the moist air mass. Dew points coming up to near 60 in Houston, and 50s all the way up to Dallas, and even as far north as Iowa. So that's going to be roughly the 50-degree isodrosotherm going right up into that low-pressure area. So, yeah, there's a couple of key features here. One is the triple point. See that dry line right there? You go west of the dry line, dew points are in the teens and 20s. Yeah, that's a very strong dry line for this time of year, and that's the triple point there near Concordia, Kansas. So if there was just enough moisture, enough instability, I would be looking for the possibility of storms near that triple point. And the other area I would be concerned with is the warm front, specifically where the moist axis intercepts that warm front. So where's the moist axis? 50 here, 53 here. So that's going to go roughly up like that. So this would be the other area I would be concerned about. And that's going to be northeast of Des Moines. And then we have secondary areas, which would be along the dry line. Often capping is a problem as you go south. And the other areas are along the cold front. There you have problems with undercutting of storms by the cold air mass, so you tend to get linear modes in that particular region. And then a third area would be out ahead of the boundaries. Sometimes you have weak outflow boundaries, wind shift lines, troughs. You've really got to comb through that air mass here, because if there's good instability, weak capping, you can definitely get stuff to fire in that part of the pattern. So we're going to cheat here and go to SPC, and there we do see, obviously, that's going to be the intersection of the moist axis and the warm front, and there we have a slight risk with a tornado watch. The next area is a little bit south of that triple point. So that looks to me like dry line stuff. And the stuff in between, well, I can see on the radar right there that stuff is breaking out, but they're not particularly worried about it, so just a mixture of marginal and slight risk. So my next stop would be the satellite. Wow, we're already getting into nighttime, so we can't make this video too long, or some of you are going to be in bed by the time it's ready for viewing. So let's see here. We've got Iowa, Minnesota there, and it looks like we've got convection breaking out, and it looks like it's moving very quickly. It's embedded in that mid-level flow. I don't see too much stuff rooted solidly in the boundary layer, so I think these cells are a little bit elevated. Now let me pause that right about there and kind of look at some of these elements. Well, we know the moist axis is kind of flowing up like that, and we are seeing some overshooting tops there in the Minneapolis area, and I suspect due to the warm front being here, this stuff here is probably a little bit elevated, since that's kind of decoupled from the warm, moist air mass. In fact, let's go to the Aviation Weather Center, and we take a look here, and yeah, I think maybe a little pie slice of that warm, moist air is making it up to the Minneapolis area. So I'm going to put that front pretty much right down through here. And the warm front, that's going to run a little bit like that right there. So we're still looking at the intersection of that moist axis and the warm front, but maybe bringing that a little bit closer to the surface low. All of this wind field that has a slight easterly component would be favored for severe weather, since you're kind of elongated in the hodograph where you have that southeast flow. Not so much of that down along the cold front itself, and that's why there's not a whole lot of concern with that. But of course you can still get some hail and wind, especially wind, along those cold fronts. Then further down the boundary, let's see what's happening in Kansas. That's where we've got that triple point going on. So first we put in the cold front. Looks like it's come through Des Moines, passing Manhattan, and passing Salina. Then the dry line. Let me use the proper colors here. Looks to me like it's just past Topeka there, 29-degree dew point, and out ahead of it, 54 dew point at Kansas City, with the wind gusting to 35 miles an hour. So the triple point pretty much near St. Joseph, Missouri, and I guess they're kind of keeping an eye on that stuff near the dry line, probably where the moisture is a little bit richer. And you can see that when we get back into that dry line air, it gets very dry. Dew points falling off to 10 degrees at Dodge City, -1 at Garden City, and down to 5 at Borger, 5 at Amarillo. Now, about that cold front, let's check that out. And to pick out the cold front, what I'm going to do is kind of do an imaginary transection going from east to west like that. And I kind of feel out the air mass and kind of get an idea of what its temperature properties are. Now, a couple things that I see here. Roswell to Lubbock, pretty much equivalent, 76 to 77 there. Lubbock to Childress, a little bit warmer off the Cap Rock, but it's very similar. So I think this all is probably part of the same air mass. But when you go out to the west towards Truth or Consequences, towards Socorro, it does cool off quite a bit. Now, this station is in the mountains. We don't have to worry about that one. However, just looking at all this stuff, I think that maybe I'm kind of thinking the cold front is running something like this right here. You can see Clayton there with 58 and 75 there at Borger. Normally, those are going to be fairly equivalent, so that's going to be the cold front. Looks like it's basically from Elkhart to Tucumcari back towards Deming, New Mexico. So I'm going to check out the satellite, because sometimes we can pick out these boundaries. They're sometimes immediately observable. However, on a day like this, it is dry. Yeah, look at that, just bone dry. But a lot of dust being picked up, that's for sure. However, no help with cloud lines except when you get up into Kansas. That's going to be the dry line itself, but the cold front pretty much indistinguishable. And then you go further out to the east, that's when we get into the serious moisture, and that's some of the stuff that you're seeing on that opening clip. Okay, we're 14 minutes in, so let's just take a quick look at our forecast sequence. Frontal boundary, it pretty much runs like that, like we saw in the analysis. A couple of waves embedded in it, and this well-developed one in Minnesota. Well, moving forward, the one in Minnesota, that's going to head out towards the Great Lakes. There it is. right up there towards Lake Superior. And then we're left with the stuff down in Texas. Well, that boundary is not going to do very much in Texas, maybe a couple of small waves moving up, but we can see that there's a tendency towards cyclogenesis out in New Mexico into tomorrow evening. Some indications there for a few cells, maybe around Childress. And then going into Friday, looks like things are going to gear up a little bit more. More cyclogenesis, the packing of the thickness contours, that really comes together in New Mexico. So things are getting more dynamic out there in the high plains of West Texas. So probably some storms there for Friday, good chance of that. And then for Saturday, I think things may be a little bit forced. That's when the main dynamics spill out into the plains. The fronts kind of look like that right there. The dry line probably getting overtaken. And then the air mass itself, let's just do a quick sounding. Say around the Red River, midday on Saturday. Looks like not a whole lot of instability. It's kind of elevated. So I guess if you want to talk about so-called Cape density, not very much of that. There is some shear, there is some capping. It's not a great setup, but you know, you're going to get some severe weather somewhere along there. And that's all going to move to the east. Little occlusion trailing on the backside of the system there for early next week. And then looks like maybe a mixed wintry weather event in Virginia. And then round 2 comes in from the southwest U.S., comes through dry for Wednesday, and then I know there's another wave on the way. And that goes mostly through the Central Plains. Now there is one more event I wanted to discuss. Very powerful weather system there in Europe. Looks like a 958 millibar low, 956, and then 955 up there in Iceland. And you can see that very strong westerly flow just driving right into the British Isles. Now, where are the fronts? Well, first of all, we got to pick out the warm sector. Well, fortunately, we can see that very clearly. That's the thermal ridging. And as a result, that's going to put the fronts right there along that little precip band and maybe carry it up like that. Then the warm front, that's going to be pretty much like that, and the rest of it's going to be an occlusion. So what this means is a line of elevated convection moving into London this evening, probably right about, pretty much right over the Midlands as I make this video, probably be in London about 0 to 01Z, and with that I would expect increasing winds. You see how tightly packed the isobars are right there. And you can see that tight packing works into England overnight. 3 in the morning, British time, 6 in the morning, so it's going to be a very windy night there in the UK. Let's take a look at a TAF. You can go over to Aviation Weather Center for that too. Get all your TAF needs met. So EGLL, that's going to be London Heathrow Airport. We're going to get that TAF in the current observation, and there you go. So right now, winds are steady at about 20. No gusts. It is kind of drizzly and unsettled. And they're indicating that the winds are going to pick up to 25 to 40 knots around the wee hours in the morning. And then as we get the convective heating during the day, they're going to pick up once again up to 36 knots. So if you're flying into London, it's going to be very bumpy. Okay, and we'll have to wrap it up there and get this packaged and uploaded. So let me get started on that. Thank you for your support and watching the video and sharing. It's important to me that as many of you as possible spread the word about Forecast Lab, post it on social media, and hopefully we can get more of you watching these programs as we go into spring. Okay, have a great one, and we'll see you again for tomorrow's video. Bye-bye.